In this tutorial, we'll be talking about beginning graphing. We'll graph two functions, a parabola and a trig function, and we'll look at some of the common window and zoom features that you might want to use. To get started, turn on your calculator, and we're going to go to the y equals button. This is where you'll enter your equation. You can enter multiple equations on one screen, or you can just enter one equation at a time. First, we're going to enter y equals x squared plus 1. The x button is located here, where it says x t theta n. We'll do x raised to the second power. I'm going to arrow to the right to get out of the power and do plus 1. When you have the equation as you'd like it, you can hit the graph button on the far right. You'll notice it graphed your parabola. The standard window goes from -10 on the x-axis to +10 and -10 on the y-axis to +10 on the y-axis. You can use this to talk about features of the graph. You can see that the parabola is opening up, and you can see a few of its points. One of the first things you can do to investigate the graph is press the trace button. This gives you a cursor on your graph, which you can move to the right and left. You can see the actual x and y values down at the bottom of your screen. This is not always precise if you're looking for a particular point, but it can give you a good idea of where the points are. For instance, I can see that the vertex is at 0, 1. And I can go up the left side of the graph as well. Another feature you might use is the zoom and window buttons. These will both change your window to a better viewing window. If I look at the zoom button, I could zoom in on a point or zoom out. The standard zoom here, 6, will get you back to this window that we're looking at right now. So let's check out the zoom in button, number 2. I can either arrow and hit enter or press the number 2 and it'll go there directly. Now it looks like nothing's happened because I have to tell it where to zoom into. So I take the arrows and I can see my flashing cursor, and perhaps I'd like to zoom in just a little below the function. Once I have my spot that I'd like to zoom in on, I hit enter. And now it's centered around that spot where I zoomed in. You can see this part of the parabola much better now if I needed to investigate some aspect of the graph. To get back to that window I was at before, I would go back to zoom and do number 6, zoom standard, to return to the original window. Another way to adjust the window is by using the window button here. In this case, I can adjust the actual values of the window. So if we go back to the graph for a second, you'll see that there's a lot of empty space down here. That's where all the negative y values are. So perhaps I could change my window to eliminate all that space. If we go back to the window key, you can see the window values. The x-min is the smallest x value and the x-max is the largest. So this is saying that the x-axis goes from -10 to +10. Down here, y-min and y-max tell me the y-axis goes from -10 to +10 as well. X-scale and y-scale tell you where the tick marks are going to go. So I'm going to have a tick mark every one space. If I wanted fewer tick marks, I could do them every 2 or 3 spaces, or some other number that makes sense for my problem. But here, we said we wanted to get rid of some of that empty space below the graph. So I'm going to change the y values. So I'm going to arrow down, and instead of having the y-axis go to -10, I think I'd like it just to go to -1. You like to give yourself a little bit of space around the graph. Now the rest of this looks fine, so I'm going to hit graph, and there's my new graph. It now goes from -1 on the y to +10, and the x's have stayed the same, -10 to 10. We're going to graph one additional function, and that's a trig function. So let's go back to the y equals screen. Now if I wanted the parabola and the trig function to show up on the same graph, I would go to the y2. But I don't want to do that, so I'm going to clear out the equation by hitting clear and enter a trig equation. I'm going to look at sine of 2x. So y equals sine, and then if I want 2x, I just 2x. It gives you the parentheses automatically, so I just want to close that parentheses and hit graph. Now you'll notice this graph is showing up only at the bottom of the screen. So I'd like to fix that window as well. One nice zoom feature that you should use for all trig graphs, if we go to the zoom, you see the Z trig number 7. That will fix the window to be more appropriate for most trig graphs. So if I hit zoom trig, now I get a graph that's centered and that looks a little better. What this does is it changes the window from negative 2 pi to positive 2 pi on the x-axis, and on the y-axis from negative 4 to positive 4. This gives you a much better viewing window. Again, if I wanted to adjust anything, I could go to zoom or to window. I'm just going to show you one additional thing in window. Now you notice here it's hard to see the tick marks. That's because they're crossing where the function crosses the x-axis. So I want to add a few additional tick marks. If I go to window here, and if I go to x scale, the third item down, now this is a long decimal. That's actually pi over 2 there. I'm going to change my x scale to pi over 4, just so I can see a few more of the values that are happening here. So you can enter decimals or you can enter things like pi in here. So I'm going to go second, the caret sign to get pi, and divide by 4. Okay, and what that'll do on the graph, once I hit graph, is it's created all these additional tick marks you'll see now. So this is pi over 4, pi over 2, 3 pi over 4, 4 pi over 4, or pi here. So I've got some additional marks that I can see. Thanks for joining me on graphing, and look for other videos on additional calculator topics.